support. President Xi welcomed the improvement in Seoul-Pyongyang relations and said he actively supports President Moon and the efforts of his administration. President Xi also stressed any improvement in the relationship between Seoul and Pyongyang must coincide with the process of denuclearization. The two leaders also agreed to continue their joint efforts in resolving the North Korean nuclear issue peacefully and pledged to reinforce strategic communication and cooperation, so the recent push for dialogue will go beyond North Korea's participation in the Winter Olympics and ultimately result in the establishment of peace on the peninsula. Regarding Seoul's relationship with Beijing, the two leaders said both Korean and Chinese people have been able to feel the boosted bilateral exchanges and collaboration between the two countries since President Moon's state visit to China, calling it a huge success. President Moon invited President Xi to the closing ceremony of the Pyeongchang Games, as Beijing is set to host the next Winter Olympic Games in 2022. While the Chinese president didn't give any definitive answer, he pledged to closely work together with Korea to ensure a successful transition. Thursday's phone call was the second phone conversation between the two leaders since President Moon took office in May, and the first since the South Korean leader made a state visit to China last month. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
The United States and Canada, meanwhile, will host a meeting in Vancouver next week on measures to tackle North Korea's nuclear and missile programs. It'll be a two-day gathering bringing together the foreign ministers of 16 countries, including South Korea and Japan. Kim Yo-gen reports.
The U.S. State Department revealed that foreign ministers from 16 countries will be participating in the Vancouver Foreign Ministers meeting on security and stability on the Korean Peninsula. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and Canadian Foreign Minister Chrystia Freeland will host the two-day meeting, which will kick off on Monday. On Thursday, U.S. State Department spokesperson Heather Nauert said that the meeting will bring together nations from across the world to demonstrate international solidarity against North Korea's dangerous and illegal nuclear and missile programs. The 16 participating nations are countries that fought alongside or aided South Korea during the Korean War in the 1950s. The State Department's Director of Policy Planning, Brian Hook, says Washington will look for practical mechanisms to pressure Pyongyang, such as maritime interdiction. Hook also reiterated the State Department's latest announcement that no plans have been made for talks between North Korea and the U.S. during the Olympic period, stressing that there will be no direct talks between the two nations. However, it's thought that South Korea's Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa, who will be in Vancouver for the meeting, will hold bilateral talks with Tillerson ahead of the meeting on Monday. North Korea's state-run Korean Central News Agency also reported on the meeting, calling it a dangerous gamble that aggravates tensions on the Korean Peninsula. Kim Mo-gyun, Arirang News.
On the South Korean economy, the Finance Ministry, in its latest monthly report, is seeing strong growth for last year and good momentum going into this year. On top of exports, which have been booming, it also points to increases in industrial output, domestic consumption, and facility investment. Kim Ji-yeon has more.
In its monthly Greenbook report released on Friday, the Ministry of Strategy and Finance says it sees a steady recovery and that the economy will likely achieve the government's growth target of over 3%. It said industrial output in the mining and manufacturing sectors rebounded in November by 0.2% from the previous month, which has seen an on-month decline of 1.5%. Output in the services sector also improved in November by 2.5% from the previous month on releases of new smartphone models and increased trading on the local stock market. Meanwhile, retail sales jumped by 5.6% on month in November due to increased sales of winter clothing. That jump is in stark contrast to the previous month, which recorded a near 3% decline. The report stated facility investment rose by more than 10% on month in November due to increased imports of semiconductor manufacturing equipment, a rebound from the near 15% decline recorded in October. The report, however, cited sluggish employment figures in the service sector, increased trade protectionist measures, and prolonged labor strikes in the auto industry as the main risk factors that could hamper the recovery momentum. The youth jobless rate in 2017 edged up to 9.9%, the highest level since data was first compiled in 2000. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Trading was suspended for several minutes this afternoon on Korea's secondary stock index, the KOSDAQ, after futures prices jumped more than 6%. Just before 2 p.m., the KOSDAQ had risen by more than 4%, putting it at the highest level in over 15 years and prompting the first 5-minute trading suspension since the Brexit vote in mid-2016. The surge came a day after the Korean government announced measures to boost investment in the KOSDAQ, which lists a lot of tech companies and startups. It wants to help the companies on the index raise funds as a way to spur innovation. Shares of biotech companies were the main driver, particularly Celltrion, whose shares have jumped more than 50% in the past 2 weeks, mainly on foreign investment. Incheon International Airport is already one of the region's biggest hubs, and now it's getting a major upgrade. Incheon International Airport Corporation is holding a grand opening event for its second passenger terminal on Friday and opening it up to the public for the first time on Saturday. Terminal 2 has its own full set of facilities, including check-in, customs, immigration, and boarding gates. It also has an all-inclusive transportation center with trains, buses, and short-term parking. The first day of operations will be January 18th with an early morning flight from Manila. I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines for this hour.
Turning our focus back to the major diplomatic breakthrough here on the Korean Peninsula, the talks certainly marked a breathtaking turnaround in ties after months of escalating tensions over North Korea's rapidly developing nuclear and missile programs. And before we sit down with an expert to talk more about this, our Ji Myung-gil tells us more about what had been agreed upon during Tuesday's meeting in the truce village of Panmunjom.
The first inter-Korean high-level talks in 2 years started and ended in a positive atmosphere. The focal point of the talks was North Korea's participation in the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics and Paralympics, scheduled to take place next month. Following the landmark encounter between officials from Seoul and Pyongyang in the village of Panmunjom on the inter-Korean border, the two sides issued a joint statement which reflected a number of agreements on various topics. First, the two sides agreed to hold working-level talks in order to have a North Korean delegation conduct an on-site survey of the Olympic facilities in Pyeongchang prior to the arrival of athletes. The exact dates of such visit will be fixed through exchanging documents. The North has agreed to send a high-level delegation, athletes, cheerleaders, reporters, and even a taekwondo demonstration team, while the South provides them with transportation and accommodation. Second, the two sides agreed to work together in easing cross-border tensions and fostering peace on the Korean Peninsula. Therefore, the two sides agreed to hold military talks to discuss and resolve matters related to security. They also agreed to expand various exchanges in order to promote unity and reconciliation among South and North Koreans. Third, the two Koreas have agreed to respect the joint statement issued on Tuesday and to resolve all inter-Korean problems through dialogue and negotiations. Therefore, the two sides agreed to hold further high-level talks to improve bilateral ties.
With inter-Korean relations getting a promising and positive boost, Seoul is hoping this turn of events paves the way for a better communication between Pyongyang and Washington, and eventually a solution to the North nuclear issue. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
And to tell us more about what we can expect from Seoul and Washington from here on out in regards to the North's participation in the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics, as well as future talks involving the two sides, Woo Jung-yap, research fellow at the Sejong Institute, joins us in the studio today. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so as we just heard in the report, a lot came out of that meeting. And so let's take a step back a little and talk more about what the two sides discussed during this meeting, which was held for the first time in more than 2 years.
Right. So there was a concern in South Korea and international community that North Korea might spoil the Winter Olympic Games held in Pyeongchang, South Korea. So South Korean government has expected North Korea to come to the Pyeongchang Olympic Games because it secures the safety of the Olympic Games in the first place. And second, it might help improve the relations between two Koreas. And all of a sudden, on January 2nd, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un proposed that he can send athletes to Pyeongchang Olympic Games in his New Year's address. And on January 9th, we had high-level talks between two governments. And there are three elements that came out of the high-level talks. And the first one is, as we discussed, that North Korea is going to send athletes and other high-level delegations or cheering squad, and even some like performing artists. And second, North and South Korea is going to have military talks to ease the military tensions on Korean Peninsula. And thirdly, that North and South Korea agreed to solve all the issues on Korean Peninsula peacefully and with the negotiations.
So tell us more about the military talks that they agreed to hold to ease military tensions on the Korean Peninsula.
We have to clarify that what is the purpose of having military talks. Even though the military talks name itself is very big, but the issues are important, but not as big as like nuclear issues.
Right.
It is true that North Korea is going to say something about their nuclear weapons, but this is not the place where we can talk about denuclearization of North Korea. The main purpose of having military talks between North and South Korea is to avoid any accidental armed clashes between two countries. Because any accidental armed clashes can lead to the fatal military clash with the escalation, which cannot be controlled. So before the Olympics, it's very important for South Korean government to maintain a hotline with the North Korean military to avoid any miscalculation or any misinformation of military activities between two countries. So probably South Korean government is going to talk more about this avoidance of accidental military clash, but the North Korea is going to request something like stop of loudspeak use propaganda from South Korea, or sending leaflets to North Korea because it's going to harm their society, they believe. So two sides is going to, I believe that two sides are going to focus more on those issues rather than nuclear issues on Korean Peninsula.
Now, kind of going along with that, North Korea also made a rather strong complaint that South Korea proposed talks to denuclearize the peninsula. So with that under our belt, it surely looks like it won't be an easy task for the two Koreas to agree on ways to, I guess, ease tensions and denuclearize the peninsula.
With the Kim Jong-un at the top position of North Korea has refused to discuss about their nuclear weapons. So on January 9th, in the talks that South Korean government proposed that both countries can discuss not only Olympic Games, but also family reunion and also the nuclear issues on Korean Peninsula. So there was a report from the Korean media that that issue was proposed.
South Korean media,
South Korean media, that the South Korean delegations proposed the nuclear issues during the meetings. And apparently, North Korean delegations knew that there was a report in Korean media that nuclear issue was on the agenda. So the Lee Sang-kwan, the chief of North Korea delegation this time, made a very strong complaint that nuclear issue is not on the agenda, and he made it very clear this time that nuclear weapons of North Korea is targeting the United States, not targeting the South Korea or China or Russia. So even though South Korean government proposed the nuclear issues to be discussed on the table, but North Korea, as before, refused to talk about it.
Now, so yes, the two sides agreed to hold talks, and Tuesday's meeting was seen as a diplomatic breakthrough for the two Koreas. But some say that it's not all harmony because North Korea has broken its promises before, especially the ones regarding family reunions as well as issues regarding humanitarian issues. Before the beginning of the high-level talks this time, that
South Korean government has put much consideration of what can be discussed between two delegations after like 25 months of lack of any discussions between two governments. So they consider that whether it's good to put many other issues on the table this time, or whether it's good for us to only talk about Olympic Games. But I think that Jo Myung-kyun, the Minister of the Unification, and Chun Hae-sung, the Vice Minister, sense that North Korea is definitely going to send their athletes and delegations to Pyeongchang Olympic Games. So that's why I believe that South Korean delegations proposed to discuss more other issues, including family reunion and the humanitarian aid. But North Korea, I think North Korea thought that this time Olympic game discussion is enough for them. So for further discussions on family reunion, probably they will come up with another request, or they need more time to think upon that whether family reunion really fits their strategic interest in coming month.
And some critics have said that North Korea is trying to divide Seoul and Washington in order to lessen international pressure and sanctions on the regime. So considering that, what are the chances of us seeing North Korea perhaps demanding the suspension of joint military drills between Seoul and Washington, as well as deployment of strategic assets to South Korea?
It is true that North Korea's strategic interest is in driving a wedge between two allies, Korea and the United States. North Korean delegation this time did not make any request on the withdrawal, cancellation, or postponement of ROK U.S. military drills, which was scheduled to happen in March. But the Nodong Shinmun, the official newspaper of North Korea's Labor Party, demanded 2 days after the January 9th talks that South Korea should, all the strategic assets of the United States should be withdrawn from Korean Peninsula, and also all military drills should be canceled. So it's not officially requested by the North Korea's talk delegations, but North Korea is, I think they launched the testing balloon that how Korean government is going to respond to that idea. Because North Korean delegation, if North Korean delegations officially request postponement or cancellation of ROK U.S. military drills, then it's going to be very difficult for South Korean government to continue the discussion of the participation of the Pyeongchang Olympic Games by North Korea, because it's not equivalent things that they can discuss. And for South Korean government, military drill is for the security of South Korea. So North Korean government still does not make any request on those things, but maybe after the Olympic Games, they probably request those kind of things to make any progress on the dialogue between two Koreas.
Now, North Korea hasn't really responded to South's proposal about holding family reunions and inter-Korea Red Cross talks in order to make all this possible.
So I think that North Korea was not ready enough to make any decisions on those matters when they come to Panmunjom.
They were thinking too much about Olympics, right?
Yes. So because in New Year's address, Kim Jong-un basically made the order that North Korea can participate in Pyeongchang Olympic Games, but he did not mention anything about family reunion and humanitarian aid related matters. So this time, North Korean delegations only can prosecute what they have been ordered when they come to the dialogue with the South Korean delegation. So maybe we can propose later in the phase of the discussion between the Koreas. So maybe later North Korean Red Cross or North Korean government would respond to that, but maybe it takes more time for North Korea to make any decision on it.
Now, the IOC will convene for a session on January 20th with representatives of the National Olympic Committee from South and North Korea to discuss Pyongyang's participation in the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Games. So what significance does this meeting hold, and what can we expect during this meeting?
Even though North Korea has made a decision that, and South and North Korea made an agreement that North Korea is going to participate in Winter Olympic Games, there are many technical details that has to be solved at the IOC level. First, North Korea has not qualified for any event for the Winter Olympic Games because they didn't register their fair figure team and other events non-North Korean athletes has qualified for the event. So IOC should provide them with a wild card so they can participate. So that's important for how many North Korean athletes can come to Pyeongchang. And South Korean government proposed to North Korea that both athletes from both countries can enter the stadium together in the opening ceremony. So there are many details has to be coordinated at the IOC level. So maybe we are going to see that how many North Korean athletes is going to visit South Korea in Winter Olympic Games. It will be awkward for North Korea if they just can send 1 or 2 athletes and hundreds of cheering squads. So maybe we can see how many North Korean delegations and cheering squad and artists will come to Pyeongchang after the discussion at the IOC.
Now, kind of going along with that, how big of a delegation do you think that North Korea will send this time around compared to previous Olympics that it has participated in?
Previous Asian game has many North Korean athletes come to the event because there are many athletes qualified for the event. But this time, usually North Korean athletes are less than 10 in previous Winter Olympic Games. And even 2014 Sochi Olympic Games, North Korea couldn't send any athletes to the game. So the number of athletes is not going to be big, that's for sure. And it depends on how North Korea is going to utilize this event to do their kind of public foreign policy things.
All right. Now, there are 2 major phone calls that President Moon Jae-in held with 2 leaders of 2 superpowers, the United States and China. Tell us more about this and what went on during the phone calls between President Moon Jae-in and U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping and President Moon Jae-in.
There was a concern in South Korean policy community that the United States might not really welcome the participation of North Korea to the Olympic Games because it might hurt the pressure campaign led by the United States and international community on North Korea. So South Korean government has to coordinate with the United States that participation of North Korea to the Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games does not violate any sanctions regime done by United States and the international community. So the President Trump, I think, mentioned that as long as South Korea can keep does not violate any sanctions items put by international community, then he welcomes the participation of North Korea to the Pyeongchang Olympic Games. And beyond that, even though he has opposed to any talks for talks, but this time I think he believes that if South Korean government can get something out of this kind of talks and the diplomatic breakthrough by Pyeongchang Olympic Games, they can go with that, because even though President Trump has mentioned of military options or all options on the table, but what he actually wanted is that not using the military options, but North Korea can come to the diplomatic discussions with the United States and South Korea. So that's why he welcomes the idea of having dialogue with the North Korea for the Pyeongchang Olympic Games.
And Chinese President Xi Jinping also welcomed this improvement in ties between the two Koreas,
he also mentioned that Pyongyang's participation in Pyeongchang Olympic Games can lead to the peaceful solution of North Korea's nuclear issues and also the peace on the Korean Peninsula.
All right, that's all the time we have for you today, but thank you so much for your insight today.
Thank you very much.
And that wraps it up for today and this week, but we'll be back next week with more of the day's top stories and an in-depth look at ongoing issues here in Korea and around the world, so don't forget to check back with us then. Thank you for watching and see you soon.
A village full of exciting sports. It's Pyeongchang. Shall we take a look inside?